course, that's what they used to say and what many still say about marijuana. But the ultimate irony, I think, is that drug testing is, of course, most effective against marijuana users because not marijuana, but the inactive biological byproducts of the metabolization of marijuana can be detected in urine for as much as 6 weeks. And yet the inactive byproducts of the metabolization of cocaine or methamphetamine or many other, in fact virtually all other illegal drugs, can be detected for at most only a very few days. I know that drug testing leads to the use of harder drugs because I represent people who are facing random drug testing, either in employment or in the criminal justice system, and I know that unfortunately many of those people facing the prospect of drug testing, knowing that marijuana's metabolites can be detected for weeks but that cocaine's only for a few days, will be influenced to use cocaine, to use methamphetamine, to use the other more dangerous, more potentially addictive drugs, and in fact to abstain in some cases from marijuana use. But at what cost? What an insane and irrational policy. We're also going to hear from speakers during the next few days who will address the mythology of increased marijuana potency. John Morgan in particular has spoken on this topic before, and I'm sure he will address it again. That is also one of the new myths which is used to support the old propaganda of marijuana prohibition. The fact is that marijuana potency has not increased dramatically or even significantly in most cases in recent years. Marijuana today is the same drug that people were smoking 20 years or 30 years or 4,000 years ago on this planet. The use of marijuana is nothing new. The efforts of politicians to convince voters that it is also not new, unfortunately. I want to urge each of you again to join NORML and to contribute to NORML in any way that you can. Some of you, I hope, have the ability to contribute significantly in financial ways, and we need that help. NORML is the oldest, the largest, and I believe the most effective organization working specifically for an end to the prohibition of the responsible use of marijuana by adults. We need your help to accomplish our goals. I want to give special thanks and recognition to our outstanding staff in the Washington office, in particular to Alan St. Pierre, who deserves great credit for helping to put this conference together. He is National Director of the NORML Foundation, and as such a very important part of NORML's work, as he has been for many, many years. In fact, this organization might very well not exist today if not for Alan's individual efforts. I also want to thank my fellow members of the board of directors of this group, and I want to assure each of you again that we are approachable and that we will be happy to speak with any of you during this conference or at other times. And to say that these members of this board of directors, each of them are activists. Even us lawyers are activists. Those are not mutually exclusive terms, I'm happy to tell you. And those who serve on the board do so without any compensation whatsoever. We serve because it's a privilege to do so, but we serve without compensation. We bear our own expenses, and we are pleased to do so. And I have the privilege of serving on a board with some incredibly outstanding people who have made it one of the greatest experiences of my life to serve in this position. Finally, it's my privilege this morning to introduce to you the man who just introduced me, the man who founded the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. You know, a board of directors has a lot of jobs, but the single most important function by far that we have is to find and recruit and support the best national director that we can find. We have done that, I'm pleased to tell you. In Stroup, we have the man who was born to play the role of the National Executive Director of NORML, a man who has done without question more than any other individual human being to advance the cause of positive reform of the marijuana laws, Mr. Stroup.
Thank you, Dan, very much, and thanks to you folks. I have moments here of public speaking, and now that you bring humanity, we'll struggle through this nonetheless. As most of you know, for 30 years, NORML has provided a voice for those Americans who oppose marijuana prohibition. We do our best to represent the interests of the millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens who simply smoke marijuana responsibly. Arresting and jailing law-abiding citizens for marijuana smoking serves no legitimate purpose. What it does is it wastes enormous amounts of valuable and scarce law enforcement resources that should be focused on serious and violent crime. The estimate is it's between $7.5 and $10 billion a year just chasing and arresting marijuana smokers. It also invites government into areas of our private lives that are totally inappropriate. And most importantly, it destroys the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of genuinely good citizens each year. So let me use my few minutes this morning to try to share with you my analysis of where we are politically with this issue. We've been at it for 30 years almost now. And there have been times where we thought we were close to victory, and there have been times where we were getting our ass kicked up and down the court, to be honest. And we are finally emerging from those dark days, and it's a very promising time. There is an incredible disconnect currently between the American public and our elected officials on the marijuana issue. More than half of the public opposes sending marijuana smokers to jail, yet state and federal officials, almost all of them, there are a few exceptions, I'm pleased to say, act as if the subject of marijuana decriminalization or marijuana legalization is in fact still the third rail of American politics. Touch it and your career is dead. That's why, incidentally, there is this sense that any reasonable person, and all elected officials agree with that assessment, that they all support prohibition. And that's why that when Governor Gary Johnson, as Dan mentioned earlier, did his outstanding call for legalizing marijuana, that you heard our opponents squeal loudly. They benefit greatly and have for the past 2 decades on this myth of consensus. This idea that all reasonable people support marijuana prohibition. And all of a sudden they were confronted with a twice-elected popular Republican governor who said the emperor has no clothes, the drug war is a failure, and it's time to legalize marijuana. Governor Johnson's out-front position has been one of the most important developments, I agree, in the last year, no doubt about it. Along with the victory, I think, on the medical use initiative in Maine. And it is suggestive of bigger things to come. He's not the only state and federal elected official who is considering breaking with the war on drugs. And I suspect over the next year you're going to hear from other high elected officials who say it's time we're honest, the American people, and it's time we look for alternatives to marijuana prohibition. But there are other concrete ways I'd like to point out a few things that we can point to that demonstrate that the public is actually moving in our direction on this issue. Cottonelle. As Dan mentioned, in all 6 states in which marijuana the medical use marijuana has been on the ballot, it is passed and passed overwhelmingly. And we can add to that the District of Columbia, where we are now, although Congress interceded, I'm sorry to say, so it's not taking effect. And we hope in November, and expect in this November, we will be able to add Colorado and Nevada to that list as well. We will be hearing from some of the folks most directly involved in those initiative efforts later on in the conference, and they certainly deserve our thanks and appreciation. Perhaps equally as important, or in some ways more important, in Oregon in November of 1998, after a Republican legislature had voted to recriminalize minor marijuana offenses, where, remember, Oregon was the first state to decriminalize marijuana in 73, so they had 25 years experience with decriminalization, and they liked it, but the Oregon legislature was taken over by the Republican Party, and they had their own agenda, so they passed a law to recriminalize marijuana. The good people of Oregon collected sufficient signatures to put that on the ballot. It was a referendum, and 67% of all of the voters in the state of Oregon said no. We do not want to start arresting marijuana smokers. And I don't think that's only Oregon where we enjoy that support, folks. I think if we are able to put that question to voters in many other states in this country, we will win it among the voters, although not yet, obviously, with our elected officials. And in private polls that we have access to, we know that more than half of the public, in fact, say we should not send marijuana smokers to jail. The public understands that marijuana smokers are not the problem. They know the difference between marijuana smokers and violent criminals. and they oppose spending